Good afternoon, guys. Lovely day in Pasadena, and this conference has been nothing but awesome. So thank you to Community Games and everyone else that worked for this. Paul and Katy, everyone. I'm Tony from Magic Eden, but we want to hear their story, hear about Wildcard, their vision, and in the end, we have some time for Q&A, so fire away. Guys, would you like to make an introduction about yourself, where you come from, what led you here, what are you most excited about, anything. This is really casual, so.
Seriously, super, super casual. I'm Katy. I'm one half of the founding team of Wildcard Alliance, and my background is kind of weirdly varied, but definitely kind of moves more in the linear media space, and I married into video games.
Yes, it's true. My name is Paul. I'm the other part of that founding team. I've been making video games for over 25 years. I got my start in the industry moving out to Dallas as a 19-year-old kid and joining a small team called Ensemble Studios, and we shipped our first game, Age of Empires, back in 1997. I kind of grew up there at that studio, shipped all of the Age of Empires games. We sold that to Microsoft. We created Halo Wars. So that was a pretty wonderful experience. Most of the team that we're working with today is the same team, the same core team that built Age of Empires.
Yeah, but they started working with you when you were a 19-year-old kid.
It's true. They were sneaking me into bars at conferences like this. That was their favorite pastime back then. Yes. We left Ensemble Studios in 2008 to start one of the first iPhone game studios. Before that was the cool thing to do. Most of my friends and colleagues did not think that was a good idea, but Katy supported it, and
I was like, look, man, you can do it right now when we have a very low mortgage and only one child. If you're going to do it, this is the time.
It was scary. We did not have much money in our bank account, but I think we saw the potential in the iPhone early. So we left, we started that studio, and we ended up creating a franchise in a game called Words with Friends, which I had felt incredibly blessed at that point to have worked on the Age of Empires series and had that been a mega hit with tens of millions of players. Words with Friends had tens of millions of players in its first couple months and went on to have over 500 million players. So that was an incredible journey. We sold that company to Zynga, and we went through the IPO in 2010, I think.
I don't remember. It was kind of a blur. We had like another kid in the middle of that.
Yes.
And
a couple of them. We have three now. So we were there at Zynga for a couple of years. Then we left and we started this company together called Playful. Playful is kind of our vision of bringing world-class IP and beloved characters and stories and kind of the world Katy comes from together with truly great gameplay and games that we imagine ourselves playing decades from now. You know, I think that's the legacy that we left behind with Age of Empires. Age 2 had its best year last year on Steam, so people are still playing the heck out of the game, which I love. We're now working on Wildcard, which is, for us, although it may not seem like it has a lot in common with Words with Friends, and then the game we worked on after that, which was called Lucky's Tale, which was one of the first games for the Oculus VR headset. We have now made a career out of building games on these emerging technology frontiers. And so
I think that's really just due to your relentless optimism.
I mean, I like to think that we see something. There's technologies that come out all the time that impact video games, but we've had this amazing ability to be a part of transformations in the entire industry, like what happened with video games in mobile, what is happening in VR, and what I now believe is going to happen with Web3, is happening with Web3. So we actually been working on this game Wildcard for many years. It started life before it was a Web3 game, and we could talk a little bit about that, but we raised the kind of most recent history. We raised $46 million from Paradigm about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. Yeah, it's been a while. And we are building what we hope is one of Web3's first truly great video games, a AAA competitive action collectible strategy game. Woo. Long history, sorry.
Boom.
So let's talk about Wildcard. You guys shifted from Web 2 to Web 3, right? What led you to that switch? What about Web 3 that's so attractive to you?
Okay,
You're going to tell the story about how I hate Web3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Paul, like any real good game designer in the beginning, heard about Web3 and was like, well, that's BS. Like, if interoperability was a thing, game developers would have figured that out a long time ago. And, I said, look, you just talk to these people. And it was actually Mark Long at Shrapnel, who I know you guys just heard from, Shrapnel team. But it was actually Mark Long that kind of changed Paul's mind. And he explained something in a way that made it very clear that Web3 was the answer to a problem that we found when we were first developing Wildcard, which was we really wanted a way to disrupt the kind of value proposition of streamers. We saw that streamers were being cut out of a lot of the profit and exploited, honestly. And we were like, okay, they're bringing so much to this. They should be actually participating in those profits. And so we actually went to a lot of the major companies, Twitch, Mixer at the time, and said, hey, here's some ideas we have for how these people can actually benefit more from the work that they're doing and from the eyeballs that they're bringing. And that, frankly, if you're a large company, you're like, why do I want to do that? Like, why do I want to share that? And then when we understood what exactly blockchain was, we realized that it, in and of itself, could answer that question, that it could allow us to connect creators directly with their fans and have it be a mutually beneficial situation.
The vision that we've had from Wildcard from the beginning was to create an ecosystem and a game that could bring these content creators, these streamers, these amazing people, talented people who are building these businesses from their bedrooms and are doing us such a service as game creators. We've had moments where like we would make several $100,000 in a weekend entirely because a single streamer decided to stream one of our games. And
that happened with Creativerse.
Yeah,
which
it was
is
one
like
of our
a
very
block
first,
game.
very early, small, tiny indie games. And I think seeing that and feeling like there wasn't a good way to share in that value, or really wanting to, feeling like, if we could somehow build a game that allowed us all to share in that value that's being created, then it's a win-win for everybody. Why isn't that happening? So like Katy said, we went to those platforms, and it was kind of a difficult conversation. This was still when I was extremely skeptical about Web3 and didn't think it had any value, and we were just building this game. And like Katy said, the platforms weren't interested in reevaluating their business model and trying to figure out how to create more value. They kind of have something that works, or at least did at the time. When Web3, when Mark Long at Shrapnel finally had that conversation and kind of opened my eyes to Web3 from the perspective of a game creator, which was the first time I think I had been pitched on what the technology could do, not just from somebody who was looking to create a speculative asset or whatever, but really, this is what we think it can bring to games. It kind of fundamentally changed my mind. And as I dug into it more, as we did,
No,
saw
you know
that
what? He says that as I dug into it. What he really did was sit next to me with his laptop and code his first smart contract.
Yes.
And then he turns to me and says, I think I just got red pilled.
Yes.
I was like,
yeah,
oh,
it was this moment where I think people, who are not in the space, when they hear about crypto and they hear about the story of it, they think about the most obvious use cases, the financial aspects of it, coins, those kinds of things. But what a blockchain actually does, at least for us on Wildcard, is it gives us the framework to connect those parts of the ecosystem that we were trying to get Twitch to build that connection for us. Because from our perspective, we have this amazing game universe that we're creating, and then we have content creators and their fans, and we're trying to take out that middle layer that right now kind of siphons a lot of that value away, that Web 2 stack that exists between the publishers, the developers, the content creators, and their fans. And once I understood that Web3 was the answer to that problem for us, then suddenly it made sense. And it's a little bit backwards. I think a lot of games that are building on new technologies like this can kind of start more with the cool tech, and then they ask the question, what could we build? And for us, it was more like, we already have this game that's fun and that people are enjoying.
Well, and I think the game itself, like part of the ethos of the game in the very beginning was making a game that was as fun to watch as a spectator as it was to play. And I think some competitive games we've created an ecosystem where people do want to watch them, but they were not developed during a time when people were watching other people play games. So what would a game look like if it was developed with the idea that there were going to be spectators who were not people who ultimately wanted to be competitors, right? So you create a game that is fun to watch, and there's a lot of learning that comes with that, and realizing, okay, here's what makes it fun to play, and here's what makes it fun to watch, and we can't delineate the things that make it fun to play, or else there's nobody that's playing it that's fun for us to watch. But we also have to understand from the beginning what a spectator camera needs to do in order to appeal to a set of people who are not esports native.
Now that we understand their vision, right, I wanted to ask a little deeper about the gameplay. And for those that don't know or have never played the game before, their booth is right outside. Try it out. It's fun, promise. What exactly mechanics, right, about Web3 are you implementing in the game to achieve that vision?
I don't think that Web3, in the case of Wildcard, makes the game more fun. I think our job as game developers is to make the most fun game ever, and like the principles of what goes into making a truly fun game that we might imagine someone still playing 10, 20, 30 years from now. I've never found a technology or a shortcut to doing that. Like the process has been the same. Every Age of Empires game, every other game I've been a part of, it's just relentless play testing. And what we're looking for as gamers is that feeling of like, especially with a competitive game like Wildcard, of like, I just want one more game. Just let me play one more game. Like that one didn't go the way, but I'm going to try one more time. And that, like, every one of the Age of Empires games we worked on went through this same cycle. And you'd think by like the third or game we would have sort of figured this out, but it was like we would go into it again, and there would be this moment halfway through development where we'd be like, do we even know how to make a game? What are we doing? This game is crap. And we would be like playing the last Age of Empires game in our spare time, like at night. We'd be like, I have to play test Age 3, and then we'd finally be done for work for the day, and we'd fire up Age 2, because that's what we actually wanted to play. And we just kept pushing, and there was this moment that happened like 3/4 of the way through development, where suddenly, at the end of the workday, you would walk down the halls and you'd notice that people were playing the game we were developing for fun, like in their spare time. And there's just no silver bullet for doing that. It just takes this process of like finding the fun and then pushing and just, you have play tests, you listen to the feedback. One of the most amazing things about Web3 is that the sort of culture is that people want to get involved in game projects early, like earlier than normal.
And that's crucial,
and from our perspective,
because Web3, we need people play testing the Web3 pieces of this, and it makes a lot of sense. When you're developing something like this, we want the pieces that are very kind of blockchain integrated to be fun, but that means people have to play test them. So that means that as we introduce those things, we are very careful not to just throw out some kind of collection that we don't know whether or not it's going to be a central part of the game. We want to make sure that we are play testing the fun of those specific assets and features, so that when we launch a collection of something, that those things ultimately are going to be a key part of the experience going forward.
I think it's kind of like a secret weapon that other developers who aren't building in Web3 haven't realized if they're not a part of it. In Web 2, or kind of the independent game development scene, it can be kind of hard to find an audience and to get people engaged really early while the game is still in alpha. in Web3, it's different. Like, there's so much hunger for great games and great gameplay that when we, have these private alpha playtests we're doing, well, there's a line of people waiting to get into that, and it's just wonderful. It's from our perspective, that brings a tremendous amount of value to us as developers, and it also seems like what the Web3 users are interested in too. So it's a win-win for us. I love it.
Yeah, and as there's no shortcuts to game development, right? So a fun game is a fun game. Not a fun game is not a fun game. That's pretty simple.
And you can get people to play not a fun game for the right incentives for a short amount of time. But the minute that there's something that's more fun that comes out, that if they were only playing it because they were being incentivized, that's incentivizing them even a little bit, they're going to switch. And that's okay, they should. That's what makes you keep going and keep pushing forward. But anybody can play a game for a day. Anybody can play a game for a couple of weeks if the price is right. But eventually, they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to play a fun game.
This is the thing I'm so excited about, though, is I can't believe we can still sit here on this stage and know that moment hasn't happened yet, but that it's coming, and it's coming soon, where there will be a game that is so good that it doesn't matter whether it's a Web 2, Web 3 game, like we would just want to be playing that in our spare time anyway. That's gonna happen. That's going to happen as a Web 3 game.
There are a handful of companies out there that are working on those things.
And when that happens,
we don't know who's going to be the first one, but we will know it when it happens.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to identify it.
Because
I mean, of course we want it to be us.
Yes.
But
we're working really hard to have Wildcard be one of those games, and again, to draw on the principles of just what makes a great game inherently. But why I get so excited about that is because this whole conversation that I keep hearing the industry having around, oh, well, gamers are turned off by Web3, or like, it's this uphill battle and there's negativity and et cetera. And I'm like, of course there is, but see what happens when there is at least a handful of just truly great games that people would play without any incentives, just because they want to play them. Then let's have that conversation again. And I think we're going to look back on this moment, and it'll be like, you remember that first 3XP when it was in that kind of building, and we were all there for the beginning of it?
Which also, this is really good conference.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for a
amazing.
first-time conference, this is
amazing.
really amazing. So
but also, it
congratulations.
feels to me like those first mobile game conferences that I was at, when nobody really believed yet that iPhone games would be a thing, and it was still this very passionate small audience compared to an E3 or whatever, which has been canceled now. And I just feel that same energy, which is amazing.
Now that we got them all riled up, we'd love to hear about your journey, developing Wildcard and Web3. And more importantly, I think the audience want to know what you're planning to do in the future.
Okay. This is the part where Paul...
This is where she usually grabs the microphone.
This is where I grab the microphone, because he's telling people things that I'm not ready for him to tell people. That's why he sat over there. I think that's why you put a table between us.
You can't reach me.
So, like I said, we try to be very specific about the things that we release. And, part of that is me not wanting to put us in a position where we're going to have to fulfill something that we promised that we don't know how we're going to fulfill, right? So we launched our Wild Pass, I think, pretty great way. I mean, we did pretty well, especially in the current conditions. And when we kind of pulled through, I don't want to say it. I don't want to tell people what the next. But that's the marketing background. But we are currently, the next thing that we kind of are releasing is somewhat of what we look at as our gamer tag and our kind of identity within the Wildcard ecosystem and universe. And we're really close. I think we're doing a play test within the company on Friday.
This Friday,
next Friday.
Okay, next Friday.
Yeah, and that is pretty close to done. And then we're going to be pushing towards kind of our first big, larger asset that you go ahead.
No, I'm not going to talk
Okay.
about that either, actually. But we're in the process of ramping up right now from a private alpha to more of a public alpha, and then into an open beta. And what is so crucial about that, as I mentioned, we get so much value from playtesting, but also we have a limited amount of bandwidth. Like, we're not a huge team. There's about 100 people working on the game in various parts of it right now, but it still takes a lot of energy to connect directly with our playtesters and get high quality feedback from them. So we're trying to be really intentional about that. We're keeping that audience kind of small and limited. It's only Wild Pass holders right now, and again, it's hard to predict this journey. Every one of the Age of Empires games, we always missed the prediction of when we were going to ship by a year. That was like consistent every
That's
game.
not what we're trying to do. Thank
yeah,
you.
and then we're not going to do that this one, right? Of course not. But I just know that I know what the process looks like. I can't necessarily predict the end of it, but I know for sure that when we take this team that has done this before and they understand how to build from good to great, and we work together with a community, and they're playing the game often, and they're telling us the things they love the most, the things they don't love, and we just sort of show up every day with a new build and with changes and balancing and tuning and polishing, that's how you get there. And that process is happening now. And so the next crucial steps are about getting more real gamers involved.
I think it's about pulling those playtests and pulling those things out, and also playtesting within that Wild Pass community our Web3 kind of infrastructure and assets so that we can move that forward in the same way that we move forward the other pieces.
And for those that don't know, the game is scheduled to launch very soon. So that's a lot of pressure on the Eng. I'm sure we're all working overtime.
Yeah.
But people look up to you guys. People, Paul's and Katy, they've been in the industry for a long time. They've seen everything, web, mobile, now Web3. What do you think, now you look at all the games that have been in the market, whether they, were successful, they should have been successful, they weren't successful, and looking back, right, what do you think that they did right? What was most important to the creator that you look back, you're like, the one consistent traits or factors that you think is super important to the creators today making games?
I think it's about never losing sight of fun being the most important thing that you're trying to build for, and the value. It's easy. I've worked on games that were enormous and games that were small, and I think where I've seen teams lose their way is when they lose sight of the most important thing is how much fun people are having. I have the greatest respect for Nintendo, and I know that their process of building their games is still based on watching people play tests and seeing whether they're smiling or frowning or confused or lost or what have you. There's no, even in the most experienced companies in the world, there's no replacing that process. And for us, especially in Web3, I think there can be a lot of things that can pull our attention away from the core focus on just delivering fun and joy and connection for our players.
That's the key one. Connection.
Yes.
I think that's the one that I've seen has been probably the through line for your career more than anything else. I think one of the things that you tend to say that you're most proud of is inclusivity and connectedness, and broadening the amount of people who consider themselves gamers. And that has been possible with each one of these specific games and projects and technologies. And that's the one that we see really here as a key opportunity, is connecting people. And community within Web3 is such a huge piece of it.
I kind of want to give you guys a glimpse into what that is like for me, because I've shipped a lot of games and I've been in that same position many times, and it always feels the same. I'm playing Tears of the Kingdom right now, like probably everybody is, and there are these little glowing bunny rabbits that lead you into caves where treasure is in that game. I think they're called bloopies. Anyway, working on a game feels like chasing one of those things. Like you see it and you're like, oh, we found something that's fun. Like it's working. And then you run after it and you try to chase it down before it gets away, and you try not to like step on it in the process or like lose your way in the forest or whatever. It's complicated. It's constantly high risk, high reward. But my favorite thing, like you're saying, is when we have started off with a vision of how we want someone to feel when they play the game and experience the product. And then just independent of like whether the game goes on to be played by millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions, I just want to hear people describe that the experience they had when they played the game was the same thing that we were describing to ourselves. We hope people will feel this when we eventually release the game. And so we have that picture so clear in our heads for Wildcard. It's very similar to the one that we had for Age of Empires. Like you're saying, it's about watching people sit down, play together with their friends, and just have the best time, the best sense of like feeling connection, feeling like this is a pastime that I want to call my friend up and let's play another couple hours of Wildcard tonight. That feeling is what we will not lose sight of, like no matter what. And then we'll deliver that, and I know that we can make that happen. I'm already seeing it. I see the bloopy. I see people having that fun out here on the show floor. Every time we've brought Wildcard out to people and they get a chance to play it, we see those smiles. We see them enjoying it. So I'm like, okay, we're on to something. Now, this really hard part of taking that from where we're at to a truly irresistible game that can compete with our absolute favorite games we're playing, like right now, Diablo 4. And those kinds of games, right? And, I've had the blessing, we've had the blessing of being a part of that journey before, and it's the best feeling, so we're just going to keep chasing it down.
Chase the bloopy.
Yes, chase the bloopy. I hope it's called the bloopy. I don't know if I just made that up.
You probably made it up.
Awesome. And the title of this is Why Creators Matter to Wildcard, right? And I want to use the last 10 minutes for Q&A. You got Paul and Katy right here. I think they're going to answer your questions, tell you
I think
their secrets.
microphones
they're
are coming
coming with
out
microphones.
if you have any questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions you want to ask about
Go ahead
anything.
and stand up and they'll bring you a mic.
I'm going to put the whole audience on the spot.
I know.
Howdy.
There you
We
go.
got two.
We got two. That's
one over
good.
here.
Yeah. Great.
Yep, he's coming up
go
behind
ahead.
you. Howdy.
You guys look like such a loving couple. How has game development affected your relationship positively or negatively?
Oh, I didn't get to brag on Katy. So Katy's background is she's a film and TV producer, and she's just had this amazing career as a storyteller and built worlds in linear media. And we had this dream when we started this company. I'd had a chance to visit Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams' little studio. Yeah, but it actually is. It's a small building here in L.A., and it's like him and his friends, and it's like that's where they incubate their ideas that they really feel strongly about or passionate about, and then a big studio will come along and be like, we like that one. Let's go turn that into a $500 million movie or whatever. And I was like, that's what I want. Let's do that.
And he
I feel
really
like,
only likes me, and that's the thing.
But I mean,
if we're being honest,
there's always been this opportunity to bring the worlds of linear media and traditional Hollywood storytelling together with games. We obviously are seeing the success of that now, and I just felt like because of how much we like each other and because of the two worlds we come from, let's give it a try. And now we're getting to live that life. And Wildcard, when you see it, I hope you can see that there's so much more thought and care put into the fabric of the Wildcard IP than would traditionally be invested in just a competitive game like this. And that's all Katy and her vision for this ecosystem that we're building.
Also, my mom says that our entire marriage, when we fight, it's like listening to a pack of therapists fight. So I don't know
We're both very well therapized.
We're both very well
That's the actual
therapized.
answer. A lot of therapy.
And it's true, right? So I think that part of it is that, A, we really enjoy each other, but B, one of the successful parts of our relationship and of our company is that we're always trying to be better and do better, and we're fairly relentless with improving our relationship, with improving our leadership style. We know that we're kind of a lot. And
I was going to say, there's a couple of our employees out there, so you should go ask them. They just call it the Paul and Katy show, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I don't know. I think it just depends, right?
Yeah.
But I think that we both really, I mean, obviously we really respect each other, and we have a really deep bench. So we have amazing execs, amazing employees. My parents live next door. Like, we have a great therapist. I mean, we couldn't do any of the things that we do, and we sure couldn't both be here doing it together if we didn't have a team of people that support us on a regular basis.
Thanks for the question.
Yay
So
to partners.
I want to bring it back to creators. Right now, it's a pretty tumultuous scene with Twitch and YouTube and Kick and so forth. I am curious to understand the upper echelon of creators out there today. They obviously get a lot of business and a lot of opportunities to work with great games. How are you guys thinking about engaging maybe new creators, creating new creators? Curious how you're thinking about that also within the Web3 lens.
So I think we take a little bit of a different tactic from some other companies. There's never a time when we're like, okay, how can we get the creator that has the most eyeballs to come do whatever it is? Like, we're much more interested in partnering with people and companies and groups where we can grow together and kind of change the way that the value proposition of the industry works, right? I mean, yes, I'm a little bit Pollyannish about it, but I do believe that organization and kind of ground up community work really can change the way that a community of gamers work and the way that they kind of move through the space. We've seen a lot of how things can get really toxic when everything is about competition, and we believe in competition. I mean, one of our primary goals is to experience the thrill of competition with your friends. That's one of the main reasons. It's a pillar of Wildcard. But there's always something to be said for working together and trying to elevate the common good of a space. And I'll say that when things in this industry, there started to be some friction, some months ago, we had a couple of people say, why don't you guys just go ahead and do the Web 2 game? And it was really funny. Paul's like the cheesy romantic one in the relationship. And he's like that about work stuff too. And I heard him say to one of the people that was telling us, yeah, we gave you money to go do a Web3 game, but maybe don't. I heard him say, but there are people out there and they really want this, and I want to give them what they want. And I was like, oh my gosh.
The other thing is, I just think fundamentally, it's what Katy was saying in the beginning. When we are able to have the kind of success we've had with games that we've built in the past and where we hope Wildcard can achieve, it's like a money printing machine, to be totally honest. Like the margins are insane for successful video games. And that story we were telling earlier about those creators that we've had the chance to meet and how much they struggle to build a business off the back of these incredibly successful games just puts us in a position to be like, I mean, if we were even willing to be a little bit more generous, but in our case, like, we envision being far more generous and sharing of the value that those people are working so hard to create, I think that is going to fundamentally change the equation. It is going to take a company that has the skill and capacity and luck and everything else to put out a really great game that everybody wants to play. And then if that company is also willing to share in the value that those incredible content creators are bringing to the table in a new way, I think it's one of these things that'll like break our industry. Like the other companies won't have any choice but to start to live up to that new way in which it should be structured and that value should be shared. And I'm hoping that we can be one of those companies that lead the way. I think Web3 definitely gives us the framework and the sort of psychology for that, because it is about decentralization. It is about more of a open ecosystem where it's not like, hey, come into our walled garden and now you belong to us, you're our customer. It's much more of assumption implied that actually there is no wall. This is like a pervasive thing, and we're
Or at
all
least
sharing
there
an ownership.
shouldn't be. There shouldn't be.
So that lays the foundation for us to be able to focus on that and tell a story about that internally to our investors, whoever else, of like, this is what we're going to do. Of course, it's going to lower our bottom line a little bit, but we're still going to be able to build a perfectly fine business out of this. And likely long term, this is where everything's heading anyway. So let's go there.
We want to make the world that we inhabit, that the future is going to be vastly created around, more sustainable. And the only way to make that more sustainable is to make sure that everybody can share in success instead of just one core group at the top that shares in the success.
Thank you for the question. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, guys. And don't forget, they have a tournament tomorrow, so
Oh, yeah.
go Wildcard.
Yeah, come play the game. If you haven't gotten a chance to play the game, please come play the game. Come see us over there.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.